What's happening, guys, and welcome back to the channel, where for today's video we're going to be checking out the Transformers Frankenstein crossover Frankentron. Now, as we check out the packaging, I thought the whole Universal Monster subline was dead, but it's alive, it's alive. As this is the second entry in, I want to say, around 2 years, with the first one being Draculus, who was a pretty cool looking figure, but the box art for these mashups are just insane. So fantastic artwork up front, the product shots for this one look banging, and I really like how the box itself is more than meets the eye, because it is very cleverly disguised as an old VHS tape. I believe the Frankenstein story originally came out in the 1930s, so this is kind of a great throwback, and as you spin it around here to the front, Frankentron would be strapped, harnessed to this, ready for us to crack him out of the packaging. So let's check him out, let's get cracking. It's alive, it's alive. And so the Frankentron monster is born, and it's actually quite a cool looking mashup. I also love the backstory that Hasbro have given to this character, because much like the original Frankenstein monster, this guy is an amalgamation of deceased Decepticon remains, which I think is such a sick idea. And when you come to think of it, perhaps the scientist behind this guy is Shockwave. Once again, he's tampering with creation. Personally, I think it makes perfect sense for Shockwave to be the creator of this guy, but as we check out the details, it is so nicely done. So the head sculpt is a great throwback to the classic Frankenstein monster. I love the stitching that you can see there for the forehead and the scarring. That looks pretty banging, especially the iconic bolts which have been kind of shot through this guy's face. That looks really cool, and because he is an amalgamation of deceased remains, it would make sense that he would kind of have this whole patchwork vibe going for him. So you can see some asymmetry there for the left hand side of the helmet. I also love the chest design, because there are pieces which don't quite gel together. You can kind of see some of the internal endoskeleton here with some scarrings and scratchings. That all looks brilliant. I do wish in some ways maybe they could have retooled the impactor shoulder cannon, because I don't think it quite gels with the look of the robot mode. You know, maybe had this instead been the accessory that this guy includes, personally I think that would have looked a little better. But I really like how they've painted some of the mesh or the vent details on the forearms, and he has the classic iconic Frankenstein hand design. That is so cool. So you can kind of have this guy slowly stomping his way towards you. So wicked. I also really like the patchwork that you can see here for the thighs. The sick metallic green for the skirt looks brilliant, although pretty much anything from the knee downwards is a direct carryover from Impactor. And because this guy is kind of expensive, I would have loved for them to, at the very least, maybe filled in some of these hollow gaps that we have on the inside of the legs. These definitely are what made the original Impactor figure look quite cheap. I understand that he's quite big for a deluxe scale release, but you are charging roughly Voyager price for this crossover. I don't think it would have gone amiss maybe to have retooled one leg again to kind of go with that whole patchwork vibe, because those gaps are massive. But I kind of like how the Decepticons have trademarked this monster, as he does have the Decepticon spray over there on the side of his leg, and surprisingly there is some pretty decent back paint and detail, so that looks pretty cool. And I like the kind of vent that we have here for where his brain module would be. So yeah, definitely a really cool looking mashup. Now, in terms of his articulation, the head's on a ball joint, although it doesn't really look up and down that much. It can, however, look both left to right. The shoulders can rotate all the way around, hinge out to the sides. There's then a bicep cut, an elbow bend, although no wrist articulation. But for this basically being the Frankenstein monster, this is the only position that you're going to want to get the hands in. And to be fair, due to transformation, you can hinge these back and forth, so that's pretty cool. There is then an upper waist joint which can rotate all the way around, and technically, due to his transformation, an actual ab crunch, which I have found to be amazing. The legs can kick forwards that far and back to that far. They'll then hinge out to the sides. There's a thigh cut, a knee bend which can go to 90, and then finally he has the classic ankle pivot which can move in both directions, and then the toe can also hinge up and down. So overall, a very cool looking crossover, and I do like how they remolded specifically Impactor for this character, because I think the scaling, the detail, and just the design of the body really does suit the Frankenstein monster. And as we check out this guy's accessories, I really like that his weapon has been directly modelled after a piece of equipment that Dr. Frankenstein used in order to bring his monster to life. So it's some kind of electrical conductor, so nicely detailed as well as painted. And to accompany it, we also get a really awesome purple blast effect, which to me gives me the impression that perhaps Shockwave has infused this with dark energy. You know, maybe if the Frankentron monster zaps an Autobot, it would plague them and turn them into mindless creatures like itself. And to show you guys how Frankentron looks equipped with his weapon, pretty awesome. Although, like I mentioned previously, I would have loved to have seen this take the place of this shoulder cannon. Personally, I just think that would have looked way cooler, but as it stands, a pretty cool looking blaster. Although, I will be honest guys, personally I think it makes more sense if you attach it onto his back, because this is basically the electrical conductor which brings this guy to life. Maybe Shockwave permanently straps this and attaches it to him so that he can permanently electrify himself to be as powerful as can be. And I also really like that kind of lightning effect that we can see infusing this guy with some dark energy or electricity. It does look pretty banging.
Now, as we check out a few comparisons for the Frankentron monster, on the right hand side we have the Netflix War for Cybertron Deluxe Impactor.
Now, despite all of the various different repaints and retools we've seen for this guy since 2019, Frankentron is the very first new character that we have had out of this mold, because all of the repaints have been different variations of Impactor, and I really think they've done a great job. Now, in terms of what is brand new, they basically changed the head, the chest piece, the hands, and the thighs, and with the exception of the blaster, everything else is just a repaint.
As I mentioned previously, it would have been banging had they maybe retooled the over-the-shoulder cannon.
But in its defense, if you don't like it, you can simply remove it. And I definitely think they should have, at the very least, retooled at least one of the legs, just so that it could have gone along with the whole kind of patchwork idea that we can see from the thighs and the chest plate. Here is how he stacks up alongside the Legacy IDW Impactor, the Transformers Back to the Future Gigawatt/Gigawatt. I'm still really not too sure on the name of this guy. Here is the Studio Series Rise of the Beast Bumblebee, who is an average deluxe scale figure, and
the Impactor mold to begin with was always one of the largest War for Cybertron Deluxes, so
I definitely think was the best match for Frankentron, as in the Frankenstein movie, I believe the monster was around 8 feet, so always towered over anyone that would approach it. And you can kind of see that even more as we whack out the Studio Series 86 Ironhide.
Here is potentially his creator.
We have Siege Shockwave, Earthrise Netflix Optimus Prime, and then finally Megatron compared to Frankentron. Now, as we zap this guy into his alt form, the first step is to spin around here to the back, take this panel and hinge it open. You'll then want to take the head, rotate it so the front is now facing the back, and then slide this inside this cavity and snap this here over the top. Then you'll want to take the over the shoulder cannon and hinge this here forwards. The next step would be to take a hold here of the chest piece, pull this here forward, and then take the hands and flip these inside to reveal basically undetailed pieces. So sadly, they don't look as great as the hand sculpt, but flip these here inwards. You'll then want to take the shoulder joint, bring these here forwards on both sides, and then rotate here at the bicep so this huge kind of bulbous section is facing towards the ceiling. So do it here on this side as well. What we can then do is take these shoulder joints and begin to bring these here inside. Now at this point, personally, I would recommend to whack out the electrical conductor, as it makes things a little easier rather than doing it later on during the conversion. So there are quite a few ways in how you can attach this, because this thing is loaded with different ports and slots, although I think it's best if you make use here of these ones. So snap that there into place. We can then take this shoulder joint, much like Impactor, slide this down and then line those tabs and ports up with each other, just like that. Now we can turn down here to the base of the figure. So take the feet, collapse these here down. We can then use the ankle pivot, hinge these here out to the sides, and combine the legs directly down the middle, just like this. The next step would be to then make use of that fake ab crunch which I showcased previously. Now officially it should lock into place. Personally, I love it for articulation, so 9 times out of 10 I do leave it detached, but just bring this here forwards. The next step would be to then take these outer panels that have the Decepticon logos on them and bring these here all the way to the back. So do the same here for this side, slide these here all the way to the back, and as you guys can see, we do have these tabs which are going to slide into these slots. So line these up here, snap those there into place, and do the exact same here for this side. And bang! Here we have Frankentron fully transformed
into his tank mode. Now, between this and the robot mode, undeniably this is the most lackluster form this guy has, and
it's quite a shame, because if we were to take a look at the previously released Draculus, it made perfect sense that Dracula would transform into a bat, whereas a tank for Frankenstein, I don't quite think it makes sense. And personally, I think maybe they could have retooled this, modified it to perhaps resemble the slab that Dr. Frankenstein had the monster kind of strapped to. but very nicely detailed. Again, we get those super sick Decepticon insignias sprayed here on the back. The treads have all been picked out in metallic silver, and I like this kind of jagged spike piece that we have here for the front. The kind of electrical conductor as the main turret I think looks pretty banging, and we also get some tiny turrets here along the side, and it also rolls really well, so that's definitely something. But yeah, definitely a little underwhelming. You can rotate the turret, so again, I guess that's something. Although, personally, I do like to modify this to look more like a piece of equipment in Dr. Frankenstein's lab. Now, I still know that this doesn't really look like much, but my headcanon is maybe this is the whole kind of electrical apparatus, which ultimately is what caused the resurrection of the Frankenstein monster. You know, you've got the electrical conductor here, maybe the lightning bolts or the electricity would
fire themselves through this section, and maybe Frankenstein is inside this little capsule being frazzled to life.
I guess it's better than the tank mode. I mean, you guys let me know down below what you think, but I definitely think Hasbro could have been a little more inspired when it came to the alt mode of this character.
Now, as we fire through a few comparisons in the tank mode,
unfortunately, there aren't really too many differences when compared to the original Siege Impactor, so it's kind of like Hasbro gave up when it came to the alt mode of this guy, because with the exception of the redeco and the new accessory, they are pretty much identical. Here is how he sizes up alongside the Back to the Future and Transformers crossover. Here we have the Rise of the Beast
Studio Series Deluxe Class Bumblebee,
Voyager Class Studio Series Ironhide, the Netflix War for Cybertron Optimus Prime, so pretty decent size for a deluxe class, because this guy originally was priced as a leader class, so it's definitely quite a big looking tank, but yeah, not too great for Frankentron, unfortunately. And then finally, here we have the Siege War for Cybertron Megatron. So at the very least, it is a better looking tank overall, in my opinion, when compared to Siege Megs, because yeah, this is definitely kind of dated now. We need a new G1 Megatron, Hasbro. I'm hoping maybe a Studio Series 86 Megatron, because this mold has definitely served its purpose. And so, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Frankenstein crossover Frankentron. Overall, it's definitely quite a nice figure, although a very expensive one. This guy in the UK is retailing on average for around about £35, which is roughly £12 more expensive than an average deluxe. And if you're not a huge fan of these crossovers, is this something that I can recommend? Honestly, guys, if you were to take a look at how Dracula sold, I'm pretty certain that in a couple of months' time, this guy may be discounted. And if you can get it kind of for regular deluxe price, then more power to you, because I definitely think that price point would suit this figure. It is, however, a very nice crossover. I think the robot mode looks banging. They definitely have retooled quite a lot when it comes to that form. It really does resemble that classic, iconic Frankenstein monster, although the alt mode definitely does leave a lot to be desired. I liked with Draculus that the robot mode did resemble Dracula, and then it transformed into an alt mode which fit that character, such as a bat, whereas the tank mode I just don't think cuts it. Although with that being said, if you don't own any of the previous versions of Impactor, you guys may absolutely love the tank. I'd love to get your thoughts on this crossover down in the comment section below. If Hasbro does continue this Universal Monster subline, what character would you like to see them approach next? I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, transform and roll out!